Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel. This is Business Connections Live with Steve Hyland.
Hello there, welcome along. This is Business Connections Live, the program for entrepreneurs, SMEs and business owners. Now, on today's show, we're going to be discussing how good nutrition and strategic eating benefits mental health. And joining me in the studio today is Kate Cook. She's an international keynote speaker and also author of Food and Mood, the 5 pillars of good mood handout. Does that make sense?
Sort of, yes.
Kind of. It's
yes.
nearly all there. Kate, an old friend of the program, it's lovely to have you on the show. And we were just having a bit of a chit-chat there, weren't we?
We were.
We were chatting away.
Yes.
You see that really the food, what we eat, what we put in, garbage out a lot of the time, and you do see it that it actually affects all aspects of everything about the way that we live, about our health, and particularly in business as well. Depending on what we eat depends on how well we perform. And today, what are we going to be talking about today?
Well, I want to highlight an area which interests a lot of businesses, which is mental health. And I think we've had that highlighted by people like Prince Harry and also Mates in Mind, which is in the construction industry, about talking therapies, which is extremely important. But I think there is a root cause of mental health as well, which we should be looking at, which is our fundamental biochemistry. So I know that sounds a bit fancy, but it's just like, I think we've become so mechanistic, meaning we don't really see ourselves as animals. So we don't really see what we put in our bodies as important. We just see it as, do you know what, any old fuel will do, and the result is nothing to do with anything we're really doing in terms of what we're inputting through our nutrition.
It's interesting you say this, because it is becoming, as Kate's just alluded to, the fact that this has really been pushed into the spotlight at the moment. There's a lot of people talking about mental health within business, and of course the nutrition we eat. If you have a look at this on the screen here, Lloyds Bank Chief Executive Antonio Horta-Oro on stress, it nearly broke me. He says this is the man that is running one of the nation's banks at the moment. Lloyds Chief Executive said that the job nearly broke him, dealing with serious insomnia shortly after joining the bank in 2011. Mental illness really is at the forefront of everything at the moment, isn't it?
Well, absolutely, and in his case, I guess, which, the thing is, he's treating himself like a machine. He gets in a very important job, he works all hours, he doesn't really consider that he really needs to take care of himself as a human being. He's a human doing, not a human being in that case. And I think, the thing is with nutrition and any of these wellness strategies, really, is that it can be treated a bit like the light and fluffy. It's not really tough and businesslike to be taking care of your nutrition. And also I think nutrition's a little bit guilty, because we look at it as this kind of it's reductionist. Always when we talk about nutrition, we're talking about the nutrients as opposed to the food, and the food is connected up with how we live. So for example, how that guy eats with his family. When does he go home? When does somebody in his household prepare a proper meal? Actually taking time for health as opposed to expecting it to help to happen by accident, and also not being tough enough that it doesn't really apply to him. And we'd sort of know instinctively, if you were a chimp or whatever, if the chimp, the ape, our nearest living relative, we know that if you coop a chimp up in a zoo and you don't feed it its diet, it's going to get sick, and also it gets mentally ill by being in a zoo environment. What is different for us at work? What is different? You go into an office, you're cooped up, no light, you don't get the proper food, and then mental illness is often the result of all those things.
How serious do you see it then as an issue, and do you think it's been recognised by industry that we've got this underlying layer of mental illness that is there? We're not saying that everybody is, but everybody is suffering some level of stress of some sort, aren't they? And do we get this whole thing that it is? It's associated with diet, it's associated with living, it's associated with the lifestyle. Do we get all of that?
Do you know, I think there is as I have alluded to, I think there's a really fundamental issue with actually seeing this kind of like head and body as two separate things. And sometimes when I go into big companies, I mean, as you know, I've spoken all over the world, and in these huge companies, it's kind of almost as if that we have become such head people. So we live in the machine, as I call it. We're living in our computers, we're living in our phones. We're almost disassociated with the fact we do have bodies, and actually it's kind of, I know we kind of get that probably, but I see it all over the world with people almost have become the machine, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like the screen and the computer and the phone just through the screen. It's almost like, and they've arrived through this kind of floaty world, the other side of the computer.
But we live our lives through screens,
Absolutely.
don't we? And you walk down the street, and I know this is kind of going off tangent slightly, but you walk down the street and people are living their life through the screen.
Well,
they're not even aware of their surroundings or where they are.
I don't think it is off-piste, really, is that actually what you see is this belief that we, as I say, we are, and it goes back to a kind of Isaac Newton theory of kind of machine and the world order and how we are, how the universe is. It's a mechanistic universe. We are mechanistic people. It goes back to in the Industrial Revolution, and all our working practices are by and large Victorian working practices, getting in at a certain time, checking in, almost like checking into the factory. So we've come from this age of the steam engine where it was a miracle that we could get the universe to behave in the way we wanted it to behave. But that's how we treat ourselves, man as a machine. And the early industrialists looked at diet. They looked at diet, and the only thing they were interested in diet at the time was what can we minimally feed the working poor that will basically keep them alive. So that is how we looked at nutrition and food in the workplace. And I don't think it's substantially changed. I think a little bit, but I think again we try and we kind of segregate nutrition into this kind of like, different types, like paleo diets or these very sort of minimalistic kind of functional diets, rather than looking at the broader aspect of what food means. And integrating it into being fully human. It's almost like we've stepped away from being fully human. It doesn't count for us, Mm-hmm. It doesn't count.
I mean, really, we're talking about two distinct topics here, aren't we? We're talking about living a healthy life by the food, by the content you put in, the food you put in is going to put you in a better place. But, I mean, the programme really, we're looking at the whole area of mental illness. Do you think we draw a veil over it as such, or not even recognise that there is actually issues there?
I do think I think it's much more at the forefront, as you said, with people like Prince Harry kind of,
That's helped, doesn't it? But is it too little too late?
No, I don't think so. I think it really highlights it. I think it's actually something that we, in the old days, as we may know, in the old days, which is we're old enough to remember, obviously mental health had a huge stigma around it. And I think the problem with mental health is that people can't see it either. So it's something that you can be suffering from. And if you are mentally ill, I mean, there's obviously lots of different, there's a spectrum of this, from being stressed to being properly
Well, I was going to say, typically,
mentally...
what would you describe as the kind of primary problems that people have? Is it as much as, the insomnia, that's causing issues because not getting the appropriate amount of sleep, therefore the body's not recharging? Or is it, or are we talking about depression? What are we talking about?
Well, I think there's a huge spectrum which comes under this umbrella of mental health or, or mental resilience, if you're looking at the sort of if you like, the reflection in the positive. But I think it is, you're looking at anything from really depression, anxiety, insomnia, you're looking at schizophrenia, you're looking at personality disorders, you're looking at alcoholism, you're looking at lots of different things that sit under that umbrella. And it's a huge, huge field. Even bulimia, anorexia, as obviously with Princess Diana being a bulimic. So you're looking at this huge kind of array of kind of definition of what that means. But I think it is actually about realising that is a huge umbrella term and actually looking at mental resilience as the counterbalance to that. So whilst, talking therapies and other therapies are brilliant at, looking and highlighting mental health issues, I think we've got to work on some solutions to it as well. Talking therapy is good, but actually looking at the fundamental biochemistry, which you get through nutrition. In other words, we are biochemical beings, we're complex biochemical beings. One solution does not fit all in that circumstance. And we use nutrients from our food to kind of make the machinery of our body work effectively and efficiently. So, for example, if we're zinc and B6 deficient, which we get through our diet, we might actually display problems externally, if you like, of anxiety and depression. And that's not going to be the only thing, but it's actually exacerbated by your nutritional status. So it's about time to connect these things and realise that nutrition isn't everything, but it's a really important foundation to keeping well in the workplace. But obviously, if you've got an addiction problem and if you've got mental problems, it may stem from elsewhere. However, if your nutritional status is not good, it will be exacerbated if you eat a poor diet.
All right, listen, we're going to talk more about this. You can see already where we're going with it. Hopefully it's going to be an interesting one. Maybe there are people working within your organisation at the moment that you feel perhaps maybe due to their lifestyle, it could be down to the food that they eat, it could be just the way they appear in the workplace, that you feel perhaps they may need a little bit of help. Maybe the recognition that there is an issue. Look, we'll be talking more to Kate Cook in just a few moments' time. International keynote speaker and author of Food and Mood, the 5 Pillars of Good Mood. It's great to have your company with us. We're live here on a Monday at lunchtime. It's great to have your company as always. Thank you very much for joining us today. And let's go back to last week's program. We had a cracking show last week. In fact, our guest on last week's program was Michael Dodd. We were talking about great answers to tough questions. Michael goes out and he trains people in industry across the UK and across Europe. He's Australian, but we'll forgive him for that. But he goes out and he resolves a lot of the issues that people have when they're actually being confronted by the media. How do you answer the questions right? How do you take control of the interview? Some of the techniques that we talked about last week were the kind of techniques that you can actually use in your day-to-day work as well, for that matter. How do you communicate more effectively with your workforce? How do you communicate more effectively with your suppliers? How do you do an interview more effectively? Things like that is what we talked about in last week's edition of the programme. Just to give you a bit of a taster, here's some of the highlights with Michael Dodd. Great answers to tough questions on last week's edition of Business Connections Live. Now, today's show, we're going to be discussing on how to stand up to those tough questions that you get in business. So how do you make certain that you get your message across? How do you make certain that you are prepared to answer that tough question? Joining me in the studio today is Michael Dodd. He's a professional speaker and the author of Great Answers to Tough Questions at Work.
In business, the tough questions come from clients, from prospects, often from their own teams. So the same kind of things which can work for a great answer on the media can, with some adaptation sometimes, work for your own internal audience or for those clients and prospects. If you're a boss, in one sense you're more likely to get upstart questions, tough questions. They may be perfectly reasonable questions, but you need to be ready for them in a way that perhaps back in the days of British deference, you didn't need to be so ready for them because no one would ask them. So when the media approach, number one is ask the media questions. Don't do this within an interview, because in the interview you've got one interviewer and one interviewee, and if you're the interviewee, you've got to be answering the questions, not asking them. But when the interviewer or their research team ring you up to ask you, would you go on program XYZ, then you can certainly say, I'm really interested to find out more about that, and ask them a few questions. Like, one question they often forget to ask is, who else are you talking to? Well, in the media context, they think sometimes that they can avoid the questions and get away with it. And unless you want to look like a slimy, sleazy, question-avoiding politician, which most people don't want to look like, that is not a good idea. But what they can also do, apart from actually answer the questions, is to get a positive point across. And the golden formula, and there's two of them, are about actually dealing with the question. But once you've actually answered the question, under the normal rules of human conversation, you're allowed to say a little bit more. And I suppose one of the things that I say to people when something has gone wrong or they're in an uncomfortable position is they need to look at themselves and say, well, is this our fault? Is it something we should be apologising for? Or is it something that there's a very good explanation for, which is the reason why we've taken the decision, and therefore use the opportunity of the tough questions to actually get across that explanation. But the worst thing is to do nothing, and often a fear of media interviews is actually a fear of preparation for media interviews. The same as actual speaking in public and taking questions from an audience. Often the fear is not actually doing it, it's the fear that, I'm going to have to actually sit down and think about it in advance. Now, the really important thing when you're actually in the spotlight is facial expression, which you mentioned, is that your facial expression needs to reflect the content of what you're saying. So, I'm Michael Dodd, D-O-D-D. I'm from Australia, but I've been living in London for a long time, and I work on 6 continents around the world, not Antarctica yet. And because of my background in Australian journalism, where the journalists are really tough, Steve mentioned earlier a guy called Jeremy Paxman, and he's reasonably tough, but by Australian standards, that's not really tough. So we're used to in Australia asking blowtorch on the belly questions of people, and I can help you give answers on behalf of your business or your organisation to give great answers to tough blowtorch on the belly questions, whether they're tough questions, nasty questions, stupid questions, or my specialty area coming from Australia, really ignorant questions, which can really infuriate you. But we can equip you and your team to actually give great answers, whatever is thrown at you. And when you get it right, you not only feel far more confident because you get the content right, the structure right, and your delivery style right. You've got a right to feel confident, but you're also doing the best for the answerers, for the questioners, because the questioners deserve a great answer, and you can be shown how to do it every time.
Michael Dodd there, a fantastic show actually, and if you do get an opportunity, please do check it out. A great show that was there with us last week on Business Connections Live. And if you are maybe finding your whole communication strategy is just falling to pieces a bit, or you don't feel you're communicating your messages effectively, then that program will give you some pointers, some hints as well to get more effective a more effective strategy in place within your business. Incidentally, by the way, if you're enjoying today's program, and it really is an interesting one, and you're thinking to yourself, actually, this would be a great idea for a program for our own organisation. We could brand it, we could make it all look like ours. Instead of sending out one of those dull, boring newsletters, maybe you could send out a short TV program every week or every month to maybe your employees, your suppliers, your customers, whoever it may be. Now, if you'd like more details on doing that for your own organisation, for your own business, why don't you contact us here at Business Connections Live? It is dead easy to do that. All you got to do is drop us an email to this email address. It is studio@businessconnectionslive.com. Nice and easy. If you'd like to, though, we'd love to chat to you on the dog and bone. Why don't you give us a call? 01784 256 777 is our telephone number. Incidentally, you can follow our stream of consciousness as well at BCL Business TV. You can also watch the program programme when it goes out live on Facebook. There we go. And there's our Facebook page. But don't forget, there are 250 individual probes, or over 250 hours of great business advice, probes from experts just like Kate, who is here with me today, who will give you some real insight, something that's going to change the way you think about your business. As I said, all for free, over 250 hours worth of programming, and that's on our website at businessconnectionslive.com. I'm slightly distracted because we've been looking at some of the different things that are actually on websites around the world. More of that in just a few moments' time. You're watching Business Connections Live. Great to have your company. She is the author of 7 books. Her new book is New Strategic Health. That's there at the moment. We've got a current book here. My guest on today's show is Kate Cook. Can we have a look at her book? There's Kate.
That's me. Yep.
And let's look at the book. There's the book. Same woman.
Different photo.
So there we go. There's Kate, book, Kate, book. There we are.
I can do that.
You can do that. You can do
Yes.
that. The hair's changed ever so
The
slightly.
hair's changed. I wonder why.
It's obvious that this whole area about getting your mind in the right place when you're at work, having the right diet. There are a lot of people out there, and they are coming up with some incredibly innovative ideas, aren't they?
Well, let me give you a bit of context for
Please
that,
do, yes.
which is basically, I think it's really the point I want to get across is this disconnect between the solution and the problem. And I think we're very good at that as humans. You know, it's like, what can we stick over something? You know, the sticking plaster, or the actually the incredibly complicated solution, because we're very creative people. And as opposed to looking at kind of like getting back to root cause of problems, which actually sometimes is a bit boring. So I was in Glasgow to do a gig a couple of weeks ago, and I was walking around the city, and there's these notices up in Glasgow saying, Glasgow, the dementia-friendly city. And I'm like, what bothers me about that? You know, Glasgow being very friendly, and they're being very innovative, really, telling people if they're demented that they actually are in Glasgow. So it's being very nice to people. So you're not in Prestwick, you're in Glasgow, you know, you're not in Southampton, you're in Glasgow. And I was thinking, what was bothering me? Anyway, then I went to a conference.
But can't you imagine some bespectacled individuals sitting down in a room of do-gooders, sitting down and writing that slogan out?
Well,
because I can see the essence of it.
Well, the problem with that is it doesn't get back to why people are in Glasgow and they have dementia. I mean, it sort of puts a sticking plaster on the top saying, well, never mind how to sort this out, or gosh, lots of people are getting, it seems, you know, that the incidence of dementia is going up. Let's really put our brains to this and figure out why. It's just saying, let's just put a sticking plaster on the whole thing. But I was thinking, no, come on, Glasgow's been pretty friendly doing that. That's really, really good, you know.
I mean,
there's
at least it's
nothing wrong
something.
with that.
At least it's something.
It is something, but I think it is actually, and again, these are only my opinions, which apparently we're allowed to freely share. But it's kind of like, why, you know, if it was younger people, if it was actually people working age, would we be more motivated to understand why people are getting dementia? Do you see? So if these were working people or even children, we would think, my God, people are getting dementia. Why is that? We need to solve it.
We're not looking at the cause, we're looking at the result, aren't we? And we're trying to fix the result.
We're trying to just say, let's not worry why people are getting it. Let's just say they are getting it and then make it easier for them to move around, which kind of is good. But it's actually, you know, I don't know what was bothering me. Anyway, what I found was bothering me. I went to...
This is the story now, isn't it?
This is the story. I went to a conference recently, and there was this very nice guy there. It was a wellness conference, serious business wellness conference, and we were talking about... basically, we're talking about sleep, and he was saying that this particular company had spent a year trying to solve the issues of sleep. And And he was saying, you know, and then he cut away to a kind of shot of his studio creating, putting his creative mind to solving sleep. He's saying people are sleeping 4 hours a night. It's a real problem in business. People, you know, are kipping off at their desk. I mean, what to do? And everybody's going, oh, yes, what to do? Oh, my God, this is a big problem. And he said, right, well, we've come up with it. After a year's work, they came up with something called the ostrich pillow, which is basically a balaclava you put on your head with a breathing thing and 2 big earphones that you put on your ears, and then you're able to have a kip at your desk. Okay, you're able to have a kip at your desk. You can stay up all night on your phone. That's not a problem. Doesn't matter if your room is too hot or anything. Don't worry about that, because you buy one of these, and basically that completely solves the problem. And by the way, you're only allowed in one for 15 minutes. So when you've bought it, there are very good reviews. And I'm not saying that you don't want one. I mean, I know you do want one.
The thing that's amazing about this, you asked me how many do you think they've sold, and I said 50,000.
I can't tell you exactly how many they've sold, but I can tell you they've sold hundreds of thousands of these products.
So people are identifying it as an issue. They're identifying that they do have a problem. And
but
I know
instead of going back to solve the problem, i.e. saying this is a big problem that we have, why don't we look at, you know, any other issues like, you know, for example, stress, or why don't we look at the food, or why don't we look at, you know, maybe devices, you know, people on their devices, or let's look at our policy in terms of how often we access our phone, or what we expect people to access their phones, you know, like, you know, after work, you know. But instead it's like, no, just stuff your head in a balaclava and have a kip. You know, it's just, and actually,
there is actually a shot. If you have a look at this, this is my favourite. Well, let me get it back. That shot there is my favourite one. Offices up and down the UK will be bringing that in.
There's a picture of one of those actually in a park. I mean, I'm not saying these aren't, you know, like some of these things, like these, the little ones, you know, actually you can kind of get it really. I mean, in a plane that would be lovely. But it's kind of like suggesting, even seriously, I mean, this guy, I wish he was taking the mick, but he wasn't. He was seriously suggesting that this was how you solve sleep issues.
So the issue is that there are problems out there, but what we're not doing is we're not looking at the root cause of it. We're not going back far enough. We've got people that we're working with, and we are not identifying the root cause of the problems that potentially they're having. And that's going to be affecting business on an ongoing basis. Let's work our way through some of the key things. The power to change your mental health, performance and resilience through great food foundations. Do you believe then that all of this goes back to what we eat, what we put in, the energy that we put into our bodies is fundamentally the base where we need to start? And what research is there behind that kind of confirms that?
Well, I think the research is massive. I mean, that looks into this area. I mean, I think that's too big a question. What's the research? I mean, I think actually the better question is actually saying, look at the research that shows the opposite, meaning things like sugar. If you look at, for example, something like sugar, or you look at something like caffeinated drinks, or you look at all of these, or these, in effect, anti-nutrients, you will find that there's a huge amount of research, for example, done in prisons about looking at poor nutrient quality in prisons, and that when you give the prisoners better nutrition, how their behaviour changes. So there are also studies in schools that show that as well. So, but I mean, I think it's actually, again, a problem with mankind, which is to actually sort of say, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? And actually, we are animals. If you gave your dog Coca-Cola and biscuits and expected, I mean, obviously I know that's probably a bad example because dogs are carnivores, but if you get a pig, our fellow omnivore, you know, some people disagree with that, but, you know, if you gave a pig party food, basically, and said, you know, and you then looked at the behaviour of the pig, you know, the pig would probably go potty, you know, and it's actually, you know, whiz around its pen, you know, blowing raspberries at people. So, I mean, obviously not, but, you know, actually, we just forget we're animals. We forget that there is, you know, millennia of evidence of how that we as humans have evolved in terms of our food. Now, I'm not saying it's the only thing, but, you know, in effect, you used the word energy. It's the energy you put into your business. One of the big problems is that we have couched food, or we only look at food in terms of whether it's going to make us fat or thin. That's another mechanistic view of nutrition. It's like the steam engine. It's Stephenson's rocket. You know, put in enough coal in the engine. It doesn't matter what the coal is, if you like. Shove it in, and the little engine will work its way down the track, i.e., us as our bodies. But we're very, complex biochemical people, machines. So we don't just work with kind of fuel in, energy out. We're working by very complicated biochemical structures and biochemical mechanisms that fire our brain. You know, things like essential fatty acids that actually fuel our brain, that we fuel inflammation. So when we look at our diet these days, it's hugely inflammatory. So we're creating inflammatory. Alzheimer's actually and dementia is called diabetes type 3 by some people. It's an inflammatory condition, or at least in part an inflammatory condition, experts think. So it's actually just not about just bunging food into this machine, but actually understanding that as a base level, we need to start off with the base as animals, you know, feeding an animal as opposed to seeing ourselves as humans, which is some kind of other being that the small print doesn't apply to.
So we're looking at food. Predominantly, we look at food then to feed our physical well-being. And we seem to be getting that wrong. So what's the connection then between the food that we eat and our mental condition, the way we are within ourselves, our souls effectively? Are you saying then that because we're not feeding our physical well-being properly, then our mental well-being is also being affected?
Absolutely. You know, we are, as I said earlier, you know, we tend to think of ourselves as these head people. So any solving the problem from a mental health aspect is done from a head point of view. But actually, of course, it's the physical. We are, you know, how it affects, you know, how it's all tied up. So what they've discovered recently, it's kind of been known for a long time, is this huge work around the microbiome, which is the interior, if you like, of our guts. And what they've discovered is that there's more serotonin, the happy hormone, produced in our guts than anywhere else in our body. So we may have this impression...
And why is serotonin important?
Serotonin is our happy hormone, is the shortcut of basically our happy hormone. And we have another hormone called dopamine, which is our addictive hormone. And they work in feedback loops. So, for example, with our iPhones, or doesn't have to be iPhone, but
other smartphones are available, yeah.
It's very, very addictive, and it gives us this reward signal. So our dopamine pathways are stimulated by that. So it makes us very addictive. Serotonin is our happy hormone, which somewhat counterbalances that. There are other hormones that are involved as well. But we have this impression that serotonin, which is the happy hormone, is produced in our head to make us happy, but actually it's produced in our gut. So if we twaddle food, we're killing off the bacteria that live in our gut. Another way we kill off our bacteria in our gut is also eating food that's loaded with chemicals. So a particular class of chemical called glyphosates. Glyphosates actually shuts down the bacteria. Actually, it probably doesn't... in the short term, doesn't do us that kind of damage, but it will definitely do the bacteria that damage. It kills them through something called the shikimate pathway, and it kills them off. We then stop the communication between the head and these little guys who kind of probably rule us much more than we'd like to think. So also things like inflammation. So when we don't eat our kind of natural diet, which would have been high in essential fatty acids, so high in fish, which is anti-inflammatory, omega-3 fats. Omega-3 fats feeds our brain. It also decreases inflammation. So all of these Western diseases that are inflammatory conditions, especially in mental health, If we have poor food, we cut down something like zinc in our diet. Very small amounts of zinc can sometimes be the difference between good mental health and poor mental health outcomes. So it's kind of like, as I say, that detached view that it's kind of like, however much you chat about something, as useful as that is, it will not alter your fundamental biochemistry. You will be much more mentally resilient if you then put in a nutrition as a foundation. And progressive companies see this. You know, it's not. I've been doing this for 20 years. I've spoken in, you know, not showing off here, but I've spoken in some of the best-known companies in the world, including at the Bank of England many years ago, where mental health is a huge thing out of the closet, if you like. It's they have their mental health ambassadors. Lots of companies will have a mental health ambassador. Skanska has a mental health ambassador, which bring these whole things to the forefront.
Well,
and nutrition has got to be a part of this discussion.
Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's look at how we can positively actually do something to make certain that we are having the right nutrition, both for our physical and our mental well-being. So
Yeah,
we'll talk more
absolutely.
about that in just a few moments' time. You're watching Business Connections Live. My guest on today's show is Kate Cook. It's great to have your company as always. It's a really interesting topic, this one. I'll let Kate there actually talk for a little while longer, because I think the thing that's interesting, we just don't realise we've got our brain. Of course, we think that all the thinking in our body comes from here, but we're talking about the gut, because the gut is lined, isn't it, with effectively the same cells that we find in our brain. It is the other brain of the body. So it too is actually thinking itself. It is working independently. People sometimes jokingly say that they have a gut feel. That could be truer than you possibly think. While we're talking about this particular topic, when it comes to the kind of food that we're eating for our physical and our mental well-being, what do you do about mindset engagement? How do you actually make absolutely positive that you are getting that right? And by engaging people, getting in the right mindset, will it increase performance within an organisation, or is it just another pressure that we are putting on ourselves? I had Deborah Hume. She joined me in the studio a couple of months back. She was on Business Connections Live 181. It was the 22nd of May 2017, earlier on in the year, and that's what we were talking about. We were talking about mindset engagement for high performance. It was a cracking show, but the key takeaways, here's Deborah Hume from that edition of Business Connections Live.
Deborah Hume, I'm from Minerva Engagement, and we specialise in employee engagement, internal communication and culture change. And I think the main takeaway from today is that employee engagement is very much around building connections and building relationship. It's a long, ongoing process, but it is something that makes a huge difference to sustainability in business, and it requires a different way of thinking and a different way of being than perhaps what we've dealt with before.
Different way of thinking. Really interesting programme, that one. Deborah Hume, as I said, Mindset Engagement, High Performance, Business Connections Live, 181, 22nd of May, 2015. Really good programmes. And as I said earlier on, over 250 hours of great business programmes, great business advice for you online if you go to our website at businessconnectionslive.com. By the way, every month, thousands of you are downloading the programme on iTunes. We'd like to thank you for that. YouTube's a funny platform. YouTube technically is great. It delivers it. There's all sorts of new platforms coming out at the moment. Vimeo, incidentally, now are allowing you to do live streaming there, and we'll be looking into streaming the programme on Vimeo. In fact, we're looking at probably from next week, I think, we're going to be live streaming the programme on, not on Vimeo, but we're going to be doing it obviously on Facebook. We're going to be doing it on Twitch. We're going to be doing it on Periscope. We're going to be doing it on YouTube as well. And all those will be simulcast at the same time. You can also watch the programme as well, or listen to the programme by going along to the likes of Stitcher, Blueberry, and a whole host of other sites that do podcasts. But as I said, iTunes, huge audience, global audience on iTunes, and thousands of you are downloading the programme. But you can help us out. What we'd like you to do is, if you do watch the program and you find the program useful, please leave a 5-star review. What happens within iTunes is that with one of those 5-star reviews, it will recommend the program to somebody else who's been looking at similar programs. So simply go along to your iTunes account, find the tab that says ratings and reviews, click on that, dead easy. That'll take you to a page now. You're watching inside of iTunes where you can write a review. You leave a 5-star review, say how great Kate was and how the advice was very helpful, and then that will help other people, or at least iTunes will redirect other people to actually watch the program and to sign up and to subscribe to it. And that's a big help for us, because the bigger the audience, the better it is, and that means as well, from our point of view, then it makes it all worthwhile. So if you can help us out, please, those reviews are truly very important, and they do help the program out to get bigger, brighter and better. Well, maybe not so much the brighter. You're watching Business Connections Live. It's great to have your company. We're live here on a Monday at lunchtime. My guest on today's show is Kate Cook. She's an author of 7 books. They're all about nutrition and well-being. It's always interesting to have Kate on, because I think we go through life and we think to ourselves that if we do the bare minimum, and we look at things that happen, for instance, at the moment I suffer from arthritis, you would say that would be diet related. Went through the phase of having bowel cancer. You would probably also say that that too was diet related as well. And if it has that kind of impact on somebody physically, what kind of impact is it having on somebody mentally, their mental well-being? As we've already heard, we've heard, all sorts of things are manifestations of this. Everything from insomnia all the way through to depression, alcoholism, and all those different complaints. What can we do that is a positive thing? How can we just take control of this, or are we just a little bit vain in as much as that we think that we can just live through it, we can just keep on ploughing through it?
Well, I think that sort of ploughing through is a very sort of Western view, and the way, actually there's a very interesting book called The Way We're Working Isn't Working, I think, by somebody called Tony Schultz.
The way we're working isn't working.
Isn't working, and it's actually really about that structural problem. So first of all, you've got to work back to the structure and say, actually, the sort of industrialised structure isn't working. We're turning up, we're turning up to work. It's a 9 to 5. When are we going to do our shopping? When are we going to eat with our family? There's a pressure, isn't there, to be always on in the Western world. So I think there are some structural issues which impinge in the nutritional aspects, or even the self-care aspects, which is, actually, even looking at the phone and the way we, the way we interact with that, and businesses where the culture is that they expect you to always be on. And I think we live in this very...
We do live in a society like that now, don't we?
We do, but we live in a very two-dimensional world. It's all about achievement, getting on. It's actually, again, about that human doing as opposed to being a human being. So I think there's a structural element which we say, in other words, is to step back from the madness that is actually our lives and say, so how much is enough? I mean, where do we stop with this? How much is enough with achievement? How insecure do we feel that we keep on having to achieve more and more?
Where do we start, Kate, then? We can talk about this, but how do we identify this? If we're an individual, how do we know that this is a problem that's coming on? For instance, I spoke about my cancer. I never gave it a moment's thought until somebody told me I had it. And with mental illness, is it a case that you just don't recognise that you are having these issues, these problems, until it's too late?
Well, I think it's actually that we, that especially with, I think maybe not especially with mental illness, but actually these things can come on quite slowly over a period of time.
Where it feels the norm.
Well, it does, and also you can get into, I think, down rabbit holes, for example, down, obviously, for example, if you had a bullying boss in the workforce, for example, who was picking on you, well, first of all, you might be quite mentally resilient to that, but after a while, it can just start to
wear you down.
So, and I'm not saying that nutrition is going to solve that, but you could be more mentally resilient to those pressures, because even on a what do you call it, on a basic issue. If you're drinking 10 cups of coffee a day and you're basically in an adrenaline rush, you're going to be overreacting, meaning you're going to be stimulated to your, you know, biochemically, it'll be your adrenal glands stimulated to react, to be reactive the whole time. So as I say, I think starting as a sort of big, broad picture is to look at the structural issues in your life. For example, you know, what are your working hours? How often are you on the phone? Switch them off, you know. Don't take them home with you. Make sure you create your boundaries. So therefore, you can achieve more in your kind of personal well-being strategy, which is to say, yes, I do need 8 hours sleep a night. Yes, I do, you know, coming off the iPhone because it makes you, or not the iPhone, sorry, folks, but any old smartphone.
Yep.
You know, they make you addicted. They make you bonkers in its own right. You know, they're really making you this kind of person that is so addicted. You know, actually, it is a sort of madness in itself, the whole smartphone thing. So it's really to get a grip of those things, and those are the structural problems. From a nutritional point of view, it is actually always to eat real food. You know, actually eat real food. That is the message. You know, because sometimes people say to me, well, you know, Kate, I listened to a talk on you, and now I really look at the labels on the back of packets.
But we are addicted, aren't we? We are addicted to the fats. We're addicted to the sugars. There is a real addiction to these kind of foods because we in our mind's eye it tastes better. It may not be more nourishing, it may not be the right food for our brain, but it tastes great.
It does, and in the short term that might even be correct, because that some food creates opiates in the body. So literally you can be almost addicted as if you were on an opiate drug. They're creating that reaction in the body. So food is medicine. You know, food is something that makes up the biochemical kind of matrix of our bodies. It just does. And we're so disconnected from that. So, you know, in terms of tips, if you like, the number one thing would be is to really, you know, go back and discover real food. And you know, what that kind of highlights really is the time. You know, nobody likes to step back into the kitchen. You know, we work hard enough, and in former years, you know, it would have been the women doing the kind of kitchen work, and I don't want to be trapped in the kitchen either. You know, nobody likes to do that job, really. You know, you had a hard day at the office, you know, whose go is it to cook the supper? It's so kind of quick and easy to go and get some kind of what do you call it, a microwave oven thing, and just bung it in while you're watching the TV and having a drink. But it's really that the job of chief cook and bottle washer has been left vacant. You know, it's a little notice swinging on the kitchen door saying, you know, position to be filled. Nobody really wants to do that. But it's really about not necessarily the women stepping back and doing that. It's actually about sharing that responsibility equally as a family, but also realising that nutrition as a fundamental, almost human right is so important. We get so swayed by the marketing of food.
But is it the fact that when we approach it, and someone like yourself, it would sound like you would say, right, look, throw all that out, start again, here's what you should be eating. Is there somewhere that is the happy medium between the two?
I think so, because everybody comes at this in different places in their lives, which I would never judge, you know, I would never judge.
I mean, you once said to me that you stood up there and you said, look, here's what you should be doing, here's what you should be thinking, potentially about what you're eating. If you want to take it on board, then take it on board. If you don't, well, then it's up to you.
Well, in the new book, which will be out in May, which is called Strategic Eating, it's this idea really that look after yourself, put your oxygen mask on. But in the book, there's sort of upgrades, which is, you know, if you're starting from the beginning, you may not start, you know, like cooking all your own food. You may start with looking at labels and becoming more aware. Then there's a sort of upgrade, you know, sort of, I use a sort of mountaineering analogy in the book, you know, of which I'm not one, by the way. But, you know, sort of this understanding that actually, you know, I've been on a 20-year journey. Only really recently have I been, for example, absolutely really an understanding through knowledge of how important organic food is, and people may agree or disagree with me, but I've gone on my own journey to find out for myself, and that's what I'm happy with. And looking at pesticides and chemicals that are used in food, it's kind of like that's where I'm at now. But 20 years ago, I was very pragmatic when I started as a nutritionist. You know, people are starting at different levels. Even if you just start off by saying, look, do you know what? I'm going to get a better breakfast in. You know, instead of twaddle muffins, twaddle food is my definition.
Twaddle food.
Twaddle food is kind of like sweet, white and fluffy food, basically, which is kind of twaddle food. You know, work your way up from there. You don't have to be perfect. And I think this is the definition, again, of even if people are interested in diet, they tend to go completely kind of over here and become massively militant about it. That's not what food's about either. Food is actually about sharing great food together with your family, actually, you know. So yesterday I prepared, you know, we sat around the table, my family and I, we had roast chicken, we had roast potatoes, red cabbage, lovely cauliflower. You know, it's not about, in my mind, it's not necessarily about baking broccoli bread at 3 o'clock in the morning. You don't have to go that far, but you have to engage in it, and you have to start to get the connection
To be conscious
back.
of it.
Absolutely.
Listen, I don't want us to miss the opportunity of doing this, so we're going to come back and we can talk again in just a moment. The key takeaways. There are 3 key learnings that we wanted to get out of this. We want to talk about blood sugar causing fluctuations in mood, knowing how to stabilise blood sugar and to correct the position. I need us to look at that. Learn how to break the cycle of mental stress and tension using good nutrition. We nearly need 2 or 3 sentences on that, and also improve well-being by understanding your mental health needs and using nutrition to keep you well and truly balanced. Now, it's going to be short, and we've talked a lot about nutrition, but we're going to talk more about that in just a few moments' time. Is that all right?
Perfect.
My guest on today's show is Kate Cook, and I hope you're finding today's program interesting. I think to a certain extent we have kind of wandered, because I think fundamentally the thing about Kate is that what she's saying is that if we eat more healthily, then we will be better. I mean, just by eating more healthily, whatever that means, and we'll find out again in a moment, whatever that means will actually help both us physically, our physical well-being, and also our mental well-being as well. Kate Cook's my guest on today's edition of Business Connections Live. Incidentally, if you want to find out more about that book, The Way We're Working Isn't Working, The 4 Forgotten Needs to Energize Great Performance. This is the book, in it, Tony, is it Schwartz?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to get that, here it is. It is actually on Amazon there. Through his years of intensive work consulting to companies including Procter & Gamble, Sony, Toyota, Microsoft, Ford, and a whole host of other companies, he's developed a powerful program for changing the way we're working that generally boosts our engagement and our satisfaction with our work and increases performance. $14.16 is the price, and you get that on Amazon, of course, or if you go to our website, there'll be a link to that book, but also there'll be a link to all of Kate's books as well, which are cracking books. I can tell you that now. All these books are well worth a read. If you've ever been to one of Kate's talks, sometimes she will bring a book in, and you sometimes customise the cover, don't you?
Yes,
For the different organisations. Yeah. These books should be nearly your Bible. When it comes to the nutrition that you eat and the way that you feel, your relationship perhaps with food. Once again, all the links to all the books will be available. There are 7 books that she has authored, and all those books are available from the links that you'll find on our page at the website at businessconnectionslive.com. You're watching Business Connections Live. It is, we're live here today. Great to have your company. As always, my guest on today's show program is Kate Cook. Kate Cook gives talks and workshops to business clients, empowering their staff to adopt healthier lifestyles. She's passionate about making nutritional change easy and effective. Okay, we give a bit of a tease there. Blood sugar causing fluctuations in mood, knowing how to stabilise blood sugar. We don't get that at all, do we?
No. And by the way, I'm committed. We were joking about it earlier. Passionate's horrible, so I'm committed to doing that. So that's we decided that was a better word. So blood sugar, even at a fundamental level, Blood sugar means it's stabilising the energy across the day. We do that through nutrition. So
we talk about having a sugar low, don't we?
Yeah, it's basically eating twaddle food. We referred to what twaddle food was earlier, which is sweet, fluffy and white food, basically. The very sort of processed carbohydratey food, sweet food, sugary food, will give you a high, but it will also give you a bit of a low. This was highlighted by actually a really interesting guy in the construction industry called Lawrence Waterman, who was responsible for the Olympics. He was the health and safety and wellness director on the Olympics. And our enviable record, which is we didn't have any fatalities on our Olympics, and partly maybe because he introduced a breakfast program and stabilised the blood sugar levels, whereby
are we talking about the construction of the Olympics?
Construction industry, the construction of the Olympics. So he was responsible. He was the health and safety director. I think I'm right in saying that. And by introducing a nutrition program, in effect, they stopped manual handling accidents at the Olympics. So, you know, even on a basic level, you can see that eating the proper food that stabilises your blood sugar not only is good for concentration, so you're not getting dips and highs. You know, even on that very level, it evens the stress reaction out. It's the fundamental kind of basic of how to control your biochemistry through nutrition. It controls that insulin, the inflammation we talked about earlier, and it's pretty easy to do. You know, you do it with real food.
Are we talking about foods that are based around protein for breakfast and things like that?
Well, you know, the thing is with the sort of protein argument, again, it's about the quality of the protein, but also what they're thinking now is that, you know, it's not about masses of protein. Sit down and eat a steak at breakfast. What they're saying, you know, after all, sausage and egg will balance the blood sugar, but the sausage probably isn't a health product, you know. Sorry, folks. So basically, you know, again, without being too faddy, something like scrambled eggs, avocado, and a lovely piece of rye toast for breakfast will keep your blood sugar balanced, you know, pretty much until lunch. So it's about actually keeping that your concentration and your blood sugar balance, but also for the fundamental of good mental health is looking at blood sugar balance. Now, folks, I'm not saying that obviously nutrition is the only thing. As we've said, talking therapy is good, sleep good, you know, all the other blocks on
Exercise good.
Exercise good. Of course, I'm a nutritionist, so I'm going to be talking about it from the nutritional perspective, but don't forget these other blocks as well.
Learning how to break the cycle of mental stress and tension using good nutrition.
Yeah, well, interestingly, again, cortisol, which is the major stress hormone, is stimulated by poor nutrition. So again, I was involved in helping somebody do a study in the construction industry, which was an informal study, and I did the qualitative interviewing with the guys on the tools. So basically, the guys on the site, and you know, some of these guys are drinking something like. One of them was drinking monster drinks, which are very high in sugar, and cups of tea, and he was adding up to 48 teaspoons of sugar a day, just in his tea and drinks consumption, let alone actually his food consumption, you know, things like cereals and all the rest of it. If you're drinking those kind of very like stimulatory energy drinks, obviously it's got lots of caffeine in it, and it will stimulate your adrenal glands. It will stimulate stress. It will stimulate stress in the body. So, you know, even again on a fundamental level with caffeine, not great if you're already in a delicate mental place. Yes.
It's very interesting because a lot of people do this, and you see this because it's part of the addiction thing. I remember working with somebody in a radio station, and he would bring in the mornings 2 big bottles of Coca-Cola every morning, and he would drink that through the programme. So really frightening, and you can see what we're saying. How about improving well-being by understanding your mental health? We don't really get that, do we?
Yeah, well, again, as we've sort of, you know, elaborated a lot on, and I think sort of probably, hopefully not over-egg the pudding, nutritional reference there, but, you know...
No pun intended.
Yeah. But, you know, if we have, it's just to say, you know, really we have become these machines almost, you know, we want to achieve more, do more, get more money, get more houses, get bigger things and more twaddle meaning just rubbish in our lives, but actually it's like looking at the quality of our life and actually coming back to that fundamental thing that we all do as humans. We all have to eat. And, you know, the way we eat influences so many other things, you know, it influences ourselves. You know, why not be the best? Why not perform at the best? Why not use nutrition as a tool? Absolutely. But how does that influence your family, even your community at work? How can you, I mean, the most successful team in a company I work with is the team that the guy takes them out to lunch every single day. They are the most successful team in that organisation because guess what? They talk to each other. Okay, it's fundamental in human nature to share food together, and I think we've lost that as we eat at the keyboard and drop the crumbs down the, you know, letter K or whatever. You know, we're just disconnected, and I think it's time to reconnect the dots. Admit that we're just a fat storing ape. That's what we do really well, and no other ape stores fat apparently apart from us. And it's time to recognise that we're animals, and good food, you know, it's absolutely fundamental to the fact that we're going to have good outcomes, not just mentally, of course, but physically, and all sorts of other benefits as well, socially, everything.
Well, it seems now is the right time. I tell you what, this hour, as always with Kate, flies by, and you're going to be surprised because it nearly has flown by. Kate, we always ask for the key takeaways today. We kind of started talking about mental illness.
Yes.
We've gone more generalistic, I think.
Yes.
But it is all about well-being, both physical and mental. Please, the key takeaways that we need. Straight down this camera over here. I'll just close the lid of the old laptop. Straight down this camera, say who you are, where you're from, and what the key takeaways are from today's programme.
My name is Kate Cook, and I'm from The Nutrition Coach. And my key kind of takeaways about mental health and nutrition today would be always buy real food. So invest in real food, number one. So make sure you know what that means. Real food is something that generally doesn't have a label on it. Number two, I'll take that back. I'll say, actually, you must always eat a really good breakfast. If you can, include a bit of protein with that, but also, you know, you could have, we were saying something like scrambled eggs, avocado and rye bread. And number three, don't look at the disconnect between nutrition and how it fits in with your life. So remember that you will, you know, look back at your structures, which is sort of how you're working, the time you're taking at work, addiction to phones, and the time you can create to put back into good nutrition if you just take care of the structures in your life. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much indeed. A fascinating programme as well. We've had a few people that have been phoning us up and asking just to see the pictures again. This is my favourite. I think that everybody should do that at work at least for a couple of hours, and these are really good ideas. Sounds like we're taking the mickey,
Yeah.
but
No, we're not.
No, but
we want one, don't we?
We want one. I really do. If Ostrich Pillar are watching, we'd like to have a couple for the programme here,
Yes, please.
if you don't mind. One last question for you before we finish the show today. Why, oh why, Kate Cook, is this not taught in schools? Why do we have to leave it until it becomes so critical for us to realise that this is actually affecting us on a day-by-day basis? You shrugged your shoulders there. You don't know, do you?
No, I kind of do know, but I think it's a really complex issue, which again, I think it goes back to man as a machine. It's all about calories. It's, you know, food is taught as, actually it's changing a bit, but it's taught as food technology. It's not a technology, it's an art. You know, it's really, there is very important nutritional science, there's very important stuff that shouldn't be ignored. But I'm more on the Michael Pollan view of food. Michael Pollan is a food activist, actually, who's written The Omnivore's Dilemma, for example, really about the sort of real food, going back to real food. So, yeah, I think it is really that we call it food technology. and you know, and we're disassociated with that. Actually, I've got a new microsite which people might want to look at.
Do give us.
It's called thecorporatenutritioncoach.co.uk. Hopefully it'll come up, because when I tried to search for it the other day, it didn't. But I think that's more to do with my typing, hopefully. So it's thecorporatenutritioncoach.co.uk. Also katecook.biz, which is my speaker site. Please have a look at that. And if you're interested in the private clinic side, the Nutrition Coach, where we have a clinic in Harley Street, which is attended by my colleague Hayley Pedrick, who's absolutely brilliant. So I don't know really is the answer to that, except I think that we are technical. And we aren't looking at it from a holistic point of view.
The first place to visit then is the website that Kate mentioned, or you can go to the Nutrition Coach as well, which we're familiar with here. You can go to our website, Kate Cook, BA Honours, Dip Ion Embant. There you go.
Photo.
Huh?
Photo, very out of date. Even more out of date than the last one.
Do you think?
So, yeah, do you think?
So which one do you think looks the most like Kate? There's the one on the website, the one on the book?
Or that one in real life.
Or that one, what about the one on the book?
No, I don't like that one.
3 different women, all separated at birth. Fantastic. Listen, I hope you've enjoyed today's programme. Kate, as always, it's a pleasure to have you come and join us. Kate also brought in, what was the cake you brought in? It was a banana cake.
Well, it was a bread made out of almonds and walnuts and banana, and you did think it was delicious.
It was delicious. Gosh. Listen, thank you very much to Kate Cook, who joined us on today's programme. Hope you've enjoyed the programme. Kate, thank you very much for joining us today
pleasure.
on Business Connections Live. And I promise you this, we will get Kate back again in the future, because we've got the new book, which is going to be coming out in March, I think you said, of next year. Is that right?
May, yeah.
May of next year. She's got 7 books out there at the moment, New Strategic Health, and you can get that. We'll let you know when that book becomes available. Also, there will be links to all her books on the webpage at businessconnectionslive.com. Right then, next week's programme, we've got a cracker lined up for you as always. We've got Julianne Ponan, Julianne Ponan, she's going to be joining us. She's the founder of Creative Nature Superfoods. Now, the reason she's joining us is not to kind of dovetail nicely into what Kate's been talking about today. Of course, it will do that anyway. You may have seen Julianne on Dragon's Den a couple of months back. She went on there, I think it was Deborah Meenan went, I want to give you some of that, thank you very much, or I want a bit of that, and they said yes on the programme, and afterwards they didn't continue with the business. So Julianne decided that it wasn't going to be the right course of action to go down the route with one of the TV dragons. We'll find out more about that on next week's edition of the programme. We'll also find out what she went through to get on the programme. We'll find out as well how it's helped her business to grow and to succeed since she's been on Dragon's Den, and also what the future holds. Now, Julianne, quite a niche market, but is really, really generating real income from it and is going places. You can find out how she's doing that, and maybe how you can apply some of the same rules to your own organisation too. Julianne Ponan on next week's edition of the programme. Future programmes include Warren Knight, Steve Mills, the Bruder Marketeer, and a whole host of other great individuals who'll be joining me here on Business Connections Live. Listen, till we do it all again live next Monday at 12 noon, have a great week. Bye for now. Bye-bye.